Welcome to It's Alive, where we host a space every Wednesday at 9 a.m. Pacific, 12 noon Eastern, to talk about developments of the world of UBI and meet with the people who are making them happen. I'm Scott Santons. I've been researching, writing, and advocating for the concept of UBI since 2013. For those new to the concept, UBI stands for Unconditional or Universal Basic Income. It's the idea that every individual in a society can and should be guaranteed a periodic cash payment without means test or work requirement in order to make their way in the world upon a firm foundation. I recently started the Income to Support All Foundation, or ITSA Foundation, which provides support to projects that aim to make UBI a reality through research, storytelling, and implementation. You can learn more at itsafoundation.org. I'm joined today by my co-hosts, Conrad Shaw and Josh Worth, co-founders of Comingle. They're on here as the UBI guy and Comingler 1. Comingle is one of the first projects we're promoting at the ITSA Foundation. Josh, want to tell people what Comingle is all about?
Comingle is a money-sharing app we're developing that allows people to pool a percentage of their income into a community fund that gets divided up evenly and distributed as a weekly basic income. The result is that members give money when they have it and get money when they need it, so that no member ever goes a week without income. You can learn all about it at comingle.us.
Thanks, Josh. Conrad, do you want to add anything before we move on to the latest news in the world of basic income?
No, let's dive in.
All righty. Okay, so we got multiple news pieces, even just in the last few days, and I guess I'll just start with the most recent stuff first, the newest big news, which is that Iowa looks to be the first state to ban basic income pilots, and in the process also cancel a basic income pilot, and that'll be the first one to do that. It's not set in stone yet, but we've discussed this before. This was a bill that passed the state house in Iowa, and it just yesterday passed the state senate. So this is going on to the governor to be signed into law, and she's most likely to sign it, as she's also a Republican, and this was passed along partisan lines with all Republicans in the Senate being for passing it, and all the Democrats being against it. And this is canceling this is canceling a pilot that's already ongoing. It's called the Uplift pilot, that is providing $500 a month for 2 years to 110 people in Iowa. And if this is signed into law, then that pilot would have ended in May 2025, but it will be ended on January 1st instead. So that's 5 months earlier than it was intended to go to. The Uplift program is also a mix of funding. So this is public and private funding that is going towards this. And interestingly, too, this is using federal funding from ARPA. So this is not something that is even using any Iowan tax dollars. This is pure federal funding mixed with a bunch of local charities too.
So what's the basis for the ban? Like, they're saying no one is allowed to give anyone money without conditions, period? Like, if it's not their money, then what is the wording of this? That, like, how does it affect other sorts of pilots that are done privately, for example? Do you know?
It can't use any public dollars. So that's local, state, or federal. If you want to just do if a charity wants to just do a pilot, something like like the Miracle Messages pilot in San Francisco. That's just done by one charity providing money to those experiencing homelessness. That's fine because it's not something that the city government or county government has anything to do with. So it's not like it gets rid of every single pilot possible in Iowa, preventing every single pilot possible. But what it does do is prevent any kind of government involvement at all.
Hmm. Have they said where they're going to send that extra money, or is it just not something that they'll probably just throw it in their general fund?
Well, I don't know. This was federal dollars that went out as part of the American Rescue Plan. So if they decide that they can't use it on this, then maybe they'll figure out what else to use it on. I feel that just like Republicans in general have been going towards that the money shouldn't even be spent, that we're no longer in any kind of pandemic crisis, which is what the ARPA funds were for. And so not even to spend them, even though it's just sitting there being, free money. I would think that, they might be against it in general, just as I've seen elsewhere, even for other programs, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so there's some just interesting stuff, even like some quotes about this that I'll get into too, just from the back and forth yesterday in the Iowa, House or the Iowa Senate. So someone said, or one of the Democrats said, "I just don't get it. I've been through a lot of sessions and I haven't quite seen one like this. These last 2 years have been the worst attack on working class people and low income people that I've seen." And another person said, "It's not coming out of the Iowa Senate's pocket. It's not coming out of the general fund. What are we doing here? Let's close this place down, or at least work on something that's going to move our state forward." Senator Tony Bisignano questioned why legislators are more than fine with farm subsidies, but want to ban programs to help people of lower means. Well, on the floor, he pulled out a list and began to read the names of Iowa lawmakers who received farm subsidies or have relatives who have received them. He said, might as well start with the Grassleys. I don't know which one, but it's $1.3 million in subsidies from 1995 to 2021. And then as he started to name more names, he was forced to stop after his remarks were deemed not germane to the debate after a point of order was raised by one of the Republican senators. Then, of course, you had Republicans saying this was socialism, and one of the Republican senators, said that what previously made America a great country was people relying on their neighbors, churches, and nonprofits to help people in need, and not the government. So that's an interesting quote, considering, again, this was a program, it's a public-private partnerships with more than a dozen local nonprofits involved in funding and making this possible. And another one of the quotes from Senator Mike Busolo, another Republican, who said that, quote, "The entitlements that we have created a disincentive for Iowans to take that overtime, to take that next job that is on a poverty clip, that is a poverty trap." So I thought that quote was particularly interesting, considering, again, most of these pilots that have already shown results are showing actual increases in work, and that the disincentive to work, again, as we've covered over and over again, is the removal of traditional welfare benefits, so that you go from $1,000 on a welfare to $1,000 on a job, in which case, what's the point? With basic income, it's $1,000 to $2,000 with a $1,000 job, which certainly is an incentive to work. So there is no poverty clip, there is no poverty trap. And he's actually saying that basic income creates some kind of poverty clip or poverty trap, which is completely ridiculous. And then I also thought it was interesting that as part of this, he said again that it's a disincentive to do overtime and to do the next job. So, yeah, what if basic income actually meant that people didn't have to do paid or unpaid overtime? What if they could actually just do their actual 40 hours or whatever?
That would be
And what
horrible.
if they actually had to do one job, or two jobs instead of two or three
Sloth,
or four jobs?
idleness. I'm curious. I mean, what do we think? I still tend to try to give benefit of the doubt and think that most of these hot takes and opinions in this vein are tied to really not understanding what UBI is and how it works, and just having this sort of very rudimentary Puritan work ethic of like, you can't give people money they didn't earn, and not really thinking beyond that. But to what extent do we think maybe some people are starting to get hip enough to be like, to really know that basic income represents a fundamental power shift, and the best way to fight that sort of a power shift is through this disingenuous argument line of argumentation that it's like, oh, it's going to ruin people's ability to work or whatever, because that's the only argument they can get away with if people don't look at it too closely. Like, how much do we think people are just stupid, and how much are they starting to get evil?
I think that when that question uh, kind of depends on who's saying this stuff, and like when it comes to say kind of just people on Twitter, just random people. I think a lot of it is just ignorance, lack of understanding of how basic income works, lack of understanding of the evidence in these things, and I'm certainly willing to give any random person benefit of the doubt. But when it comes to these state lawmakers, I really don't know, especially again since I wrote that article that got into the lobbying behind this. That we know there's an organized effort behind all of these state bills to ban these pilots, and part of that is that this lobbying organization, the main one is the Foundation for Government Accountability. These are like bill mills, so they write out the language of the bills and they send it to these members of Congress that they have influence over. They provide them with talking points, and a lot of this is actual, it's with forethought. They're thinking, all right, what should we say on the House floor to defend this? And the lobbying organization suggests you should talk about it like this, talk about it like this. So some of those senators that maybe are not under the influence of these lobbyists, I would give them the benefit of the doubt. But these ones that are actually working with the lobbyists, I would not give them the benefit of doubt. I think they're actually just being dishonest. They're having like fake takes. They're just saying things that they feel would be effective in getting getting what they want, even if it's not true.
And a lot of them just are doing what they're told, basically, it sounds like.
Yeah, I mean, this is when it comes to lobbying. This is again, it's a billionaire funded move across multiple states to do this, and this, if you're a member of the state house in Iowa, then if you go against this, and this is billionaire funded, then you're not going to get your campaign funding. It'll get dinged to quite a degree. And then they'll even potentially put money against you in your primary and get primaried. So like it's just another example of money in politics, and just the direct results of that.
I still tend to give most people the amount of benefit of the doubt that is like, or the generous take, which is that most of them are feckless or uninformed. It just kind of emphasizes like the ability to use a simple soundbite and and sway a lot of the population, but also, a lot of our Congress people. I mean, when we look at tech and how just clueless most of our Congress people about anything that's going on, it changes sort of the calculus of like, okay, who's really pulling strings here and who's just kind of riding on the boat. The
Yeah.
importance of like really strong education, like really getting people to understand exactly what's going on. Um, yeah, and that's kind of hard to do without a platform and a captive audience. It's kind of our hope for Bootstraps is to really kind of sneak in there by getting people hooked and teach them in a way that's not so so they're not so vulnerable to catchphrases and things.
Yeah, true. When it comes to lawmakers, there's if you're an informed lawmaker, let's say you already are familiar with this stuff, then then maybe a lobbyist comes to you and says that you should be for or against something, and if you're familiar with it, and you can say, well, no, like I already know how this works. I disagree, and of course that also depends on not only the lawmaker as an individual, but the lawmaker's staff. So, if they have a staff that's helping educate them in various topics, then they'll be less influenced by, various corporate lobbyists and funds looking to influence them. But, it's one of those things you don't know. That's part of the danger of just money in politics as is that we never know. We don't possibly know if someone is passing a law or being against a law because they legit feel that way, and
Yeah,
are even responding to their voters, versus responding to some special interests.
I don't even know what's really scarier, the idea that there's a significant number of people in positions of power that are all fighting intelligently against this, or that there's like only a couple of people pulling all these strings. I guess in the latter example, it's you can imagine more of like a Star Wars scenario where you just got to get the the uh, the bomb down the right hole and destroy the issue. It's like, oh, the entire empire falls at once. But yeah, realistically, it's a lot more shady what's actually going on. How many people are involved and to what level, and how which of them actually know and to what degree what they're involved in, or just know what they need to know, or and does some of it come together as sort of just sort of its own movement. I think like that across a large population of people, sometimes these things kind of form in terms of the net effect and the net push without anyone actually really understanding why it's happening, why that pressure in a certain direction is happening.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
I
it's
mean, like on
impossible
the
to know.
surface, just like the idea of an original, open-minded thinker also being a Republican lawmaker in Iowa, like it doesn't really quite add up just from there, you know.
I have thought
Right.
about trying to do that though. Like I came from acting, so just like, hopefully no one records this and brings this back for when I actually try to carry this out. But um, play a role to get into power and then flip. I'm sure there's movies about this. But basically pretend to be a certain sort of politician with a certain set of values, and then get into power and say, actually, I think I changed my mind. And
I'd also like to point out too just some stats from the Uplift program in Iowa as well, which is that 68% of the participants work full-time or part-time jobs, while the others are unpaid caregivers, disabled, or looking for work. So only 2% of participants identify themselves as unemployed or not looking for work. That's 2%. And I don't know if that's baseline data or if the program organizers like recently reached out, and or even like using one of their most recent surveys, they looked at this. So it's impossible to tell. I don't know if that's like where it started or even that's where it's at. So it's possible that even at this point in time, the data is already showing that they're working more. that there's even fewer people unemployed than at the start. I don't know, but
Yeah.
it would certainly be interesting if that were the case, and you had all these lawmakers getting rid of this based on this assumption that is just blatantly false, even by the data that's already from the pilot. Another thing is the 81% of the participants are Polk County residents, and at least 65% live in a metropolitan area. So I don't know how many could be considered living in like a rural area or something. I don't even know. It's certainly possible that there's some Republicans in the bunch. I would hope so. That of the 110 participants, that there's at least some Republicans. So these are, potentially some Republican voters in Iowa who are going to see their, this pilot canceled because of even those they voted for and support. And the group, many of which are working full time again, reported earning on average just over 24,000 annually. So again, these are low income Iowans and not all metro city dwellers.
Yeah, and that's another part of just explaining it well, is that I find when I talk to Republicans, I have great conversations about UBI. It just gets caught in this sort of oversimplified thing, or sort of oversimplified and disingenuous thing. I mean, you can have a very simplified conversation because UBI really just is cash in your pocket, and most people will come out ahead. It's not that hard to sort of present to anyone in any situation that a little more money in your pocket to do what you want with is good for you. But this sort of all these cancellations are amplifying or further validating the need for something like what we're doing with Comingle, where if we're building something cancelable, and not reliant on, or building something that's not cancelable, something that's not reliant on government dollars or philanthropic dollars in particular. And then something else you just said, part of the problem with these pilots is, they run for 1 to 3 years, and then it takes like a year or two to compile the data and then release them in this big paper. Mm-hmm. So people lose attention, or it gets canceled early, or the data goes away, or it doesn't land. I've always been disappointed, by the ones that make you wait so long when they know they have a lot of data early on that they could be releasing, and then they're trying to stick to some sort of academic rigor. But with Comingle, I mean, we're trying to set it up to have real-time data. Like, this is how the average income of the group is changing over time. This is how much money got moved. This is how many people were missing payments before and now aren't. It's like, why should we have to wait 3 years before we find out how something's going on? Why can't we just watch it working in real time?
Yeah. I'm looking at the Uplift Iowa website, and they have quite a few private entities that are helping to fund this. So I'm wondering, did you mm-hmm. read anything? Is the program being shut down, or is it just the public portion of the funding is being pulled? Do you have any idea what percentage of it was the public ARPA funds?
No, because it's not only the funding; it's the fact that this is it's a public-private partnership, so the city's involved with it, and that's not allowed. So, I guess theoretically they could try to restart the program themselves using only charitable dollars and no other dollars, and they might be able to pull that off because they could get to the 13th month and have just 5 months left. Maybe they could scrape together enough from people mm-hmm. that they might be able to somehow continue this. Maybe enough people would be pissed off, and there would be enough media attention that that they could somehow continue it in a different form. Legally speaking, it would have to be restarted through directly through the charities and not having anything to do with the government. which would be interesting to see,
Yeah,
as
I mean, this
time
is
goes
kind of
on.
what we're trying to explore as an option for Comingle is that, like, can can something be sort of supported by government without them actually providing funding for it, right? Like, is it the same thing? Like to that's why I'm trying to figure out, like, if like city of Des Moines is in here and there's like the Polk County, like these are like government like arms, but if they're not providing, I guess they're providing resources, which means their people are working on the program, which means it is government funding being put towards this. Like, do the people
Right. Like
working
the
on if we hired the people working on these programs to work at Comingle, would they be doing the same thing? Like, would their work be exactly the same thing that they're doing now, which is just to like, you know, go out and raise private dollars and get them to the right place. Like, it seems like that's what they're doing.
Yeah, I mean, there's that on both sides. I guess there's kind of two different parts of this, where there's the funding, so the like the input in, and then there's the administration, which is the pipes of actually getting people the money. And when it comes to these bills, usually it's on both of those things. Um, when it comes to no public funding and no public administration. And so when it comes to something like Comingle, then you could certainly that's that's totally fine according to these bills because it's not there's no public uh, involvement at all on the funding side or the uh, actual provision of its side.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, curious. I mean, from our angle, it's an interesting place to see like where that line is being drawn between public and private, um, and like if our idea is that we're kind of squeezing in there somewhere.
Yeah, like I would imagine if let's say there was some kind of pilot using Comingle set up in Iowa, then it would be totally fine unless some public dollars were channeled through it. Like if the same county uh, wanted to put any kind of money into it, if I mean if city money or state money or federal money, then that wouldn't work because that's using public funds. But if instead the money going into it were charitable funds, and of course just people themselves joining Comingle, then again that's fine.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd wonder like how much of the money that was raised for the program was raised because it was there like as matching funds for what the you know what the government was providing. So
Yeah, I
it's
haven't looked
really just the
into like
question of like
percentages.
where is this money going to come from, and can it come from the right places? And it seems like there are plenty of people out there that are like plenty of large groups that have some funding that want to see it get used in this way, and it's just a shame that the government is like saying no to it. But
Well,
if there
it's
is a
so
way for us to
frustrating
help
too
with
that
that, then it's kind of perfect.
it's so frustrating too that again this ARPA money, and there was just such a really interesting ability, through the pandemic where, the America Rescue Plan was passed, and part of the provision of that was, a big chunk of this. I think it was around kind of similar to the amount sent on the stimulus payments and the unemployment boost, which is around $800 billion each or so. So I think it was also around 800 billion that was provided to states and cities to use. And this is federal dollars, and this none of this was even taxed. So this was just, these were dollars invented out of nothing. This is pure deficit spending. It was part of, the emergency response. And so that's part of the reason why we're just seeing all these pilots in the first place, is just because we're in this exceptional bill that essentially enabled like any city and state to do some kind of pilot. Uh, it really was, it just opened up the door for this, because this is just, quote unquote free money. Um, and then yet you've got so many uh, so many states that are, it's the same kind of thing we saw with the Medicaid expansion, and even more recently what we're seeing with the like states opting out of the 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 school the school programs for summer, where like kids who would usually get money um, for school lunches because they're low income, that they would also get these food vouchers for summertime. And these programs for that, it's the same kind of setup where the state can get let's say $1 billion of federal dollars, and they're the only thing that they have to put into this is just cover like a percentage of the administration costs. So it's like the state has to pay in that situation, let's say it's $5 million in order to cover their percentage of the administration fees. And if they agree to it, then they're paying 5 million in order to unlock 1 billion, and that's money going into the state from outside of it, from the federal government. And um, it's just kind of crazy to me that you have states turning this down. Same with the Medicaid expansion, where you have a state saying, "Yeah, I know that's free federal dollars, and we have to match it with a little bit of ours, but we're going to turn the whole thing down because we don't want the people in our state benefiting from this in any way."
Yeah, it's pretty weird. It's just going down to the like, we don't want government to support people. Like it goes against what is we're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, it's purely ideological. There's no economics here, and it's not
I
even. I don't
also
think it's
Yeah.
good policy.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's just what they think. I think they don't really understand that the government can support people. They've sort of decided it's impossible. Like they don't believe. So when you protest that, that's not what UBI is like. UBI actually works when they say, well, they'll just take it away or whatever, that they're just not understanding what the program is. Because I think a lot of people have lost any faith that the government can actually pull anything off or is in any way non-corrupt and can be trusted. They've just kind of given up on government entirely and become, for the most part, anarchist, except for maybe like military spending. So the cause of arguing like the ins and outs and the nuances of a policy is sort of a lost one, because at this point they're not going to believe it until they see it working. The decision's already been made that government does not function. So there's no amount of talking about a government program that's gonna land on receptive ears.
Yeah,
Well, I guess
it's
again,
weird
that's the
that it's
difference
people in the
between the
government that are saying
right,
that.
right. It's the difference between the voters and the lawmakers. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
It's
I
just
mean, but people in the government generally tend to say what people want to hear in order to get into the government. They say in DC's not a city of leaders, it's a city of followers. Similarly, it's not like Donald Trump was the most inspiring leader ever. It's just he's who our country was ready to hear, I think. And I think that's true for politicians in general. Who's the person that we're ready to hear and is ready to say the things we're ready to hear? That's the person that goes into power.
I don't know. I just feel that there's something different when it comes to these special kind of federal dollar programs. This is, if it's one thing if a member of the state house in Iowa is saying, these programs that use Iowa tax dollars, they just don't work, and I'm not going to vote for this program that taxes Iowans and doesn't accomplish anything. But instead, these are programs that are this is external money from the federal government that's really large compared to the state tax dollars. Like it's it, these these amounts are very meaningful to these state economies in regards to how much of an impact it makes to their own voters. So it's weird to me how these various state lawmakers can be against these free federal dollar programs, especially ones that are deficit financed and not federal tax dollar financed.
It's
In
definitely
order to
more
help the people.
confusing when it's from the, like, what I was saying before, I guess, holds more believably with the general public. But when it comes to
Yeah,
someone given a straight up decision, do you want to invest 5 million to get 1 billion, and coming up with this way to say no, it's a little more mind boggling. Yeah, I agree.
That does make it seem like there are other powers at work, like the lobby groups and the think tanks that are sort of convincing people that it's the right thing to do. Like to act in the worst interest of your state is the thing to do, right? Like you're
One,
actually convincing
it
people that they should, yeah, say no to this, to a certain amount of wealth going into your state just
makes
because
me
of the
wonder what
way
the
it's going to be
calculus
spelled.
what it makes me wonder what the calculus is for people. Whereas, like, does it take $50,000 for me to deprive my state of $1 billion? Does it take $1 million personally to deprive my state of $1 billion? And
right.
even then, how much of it is influenced in general, like people's morality, people's decision making towards, like, the greedy side of things, towards the insular and the non societal thinking? How much of that is in turn influenced by the existence of scarcity in our society? Everyone's thinking about, like, I got to get me, I got to get mine. I got to for me and mine, um, now or never, and that's like the number one priority, even to the extent that you can make such a calculus. Like, if we had a basic income and we had basically a safe support structure, how much more absurd and rare would it be for people to make these sorts of ridiculously selfish and mathematically absurd decisions?
Yeah, I'd hope it has some kind of impact. I also just, I don't like I don't like to lean any kind of any cynicism. Try to avoid that. But this kind of thing also, does make me think about the potential of, do these people, are they doing it on purpose to the point where they want people to believe that government doesn't work because they want to do that? Like their interest is in government not working for people. They don't want to help people because they want people to believe that government is bad, and so therefore, if they do bad things, if they don't help, then people will vote, for smaller government. And part of smaller government is less taxes. And, this is, leans into, just again, how much influence that rich people have and how much of this is some kind of, tactic where, yeah, let's actually not help people so people get more and more angry and pissed off at the government.
It's not just a conservative thing or Republican thing too. I mean, uh, it's something as someone who identifies more often as Democratic leaning, I see it in, like, in every single email that says, "Let me be frank. Those bastards shut down our attempts at this, but anytime we're in power, we don't actually accomplish anything," because it's way less useful to actually accomplish anything than to use the fact that it was, supposedly blocked, as fundraising fodder for the next cycle. So it's way more
Yeah.
politically advantageous to not accomplish anything, and this is not, you know the purview of one side or the other. It's the purview of our broken economic system that disincentivizes actual progress and incentivizes fighting. You know,
Yeah, it's another impact of hyperpartisanship and this divide where you've got you have a program like this that this bill passes purely along partisan lines, and you've got one side being able to say, look what the other side did, and they're able to fundraise off of that. And yeah, that's weird as far as the incentive structure of fundraising off of loss off of, something bad that happened. Are they going to do the opposite when they can? As you said, so often they get in power and they don't. Yeah, it's a very messed up, hyper polarized structure that we're in right now, when you've actually got so much fundraising going on, about things that don't happen.
Is there a way to flip that around? I mean, say we have, all of our druthers in UBI and everything. Like, is there a way that we can figure out to directly measure and elevate and incentivize success over the ability to complain about the other side? Like, is this something that is going to continue to be a problem even when our government functions better? Is that
I,
it's way easier to sway people in your favor if you degrade like the bad effects of the other side rather than promote your own success?
yeah, I really think it comes down to, important structural democracy reforms that really lean into nonpartisanship and majority rule. There's just so much of a different incentive structure in place when it's impossible to primary someone, because you've got a nonpartisan, say, final five kind of ballot situation where those with the topmost, five finishers move on to the general election. So then it's impossible to go after someone in the primary, and you've got the moderates that are going on, to the general election. And then in the general election, you've got ranked choice voting in place. So you make sure that the winner gets 51% of the vote. And so again, that leans towards moderates and independents who are actually willing to cross the aisle and work with people. Our entire existing incentive structure is for this total polarization, where it works to actually do this stuff along hyperpartisan lines.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this is actually an extension of what we're talking about too, but this is another state that also just happened in the past week, and this is Texas. So the Texas actually was not able to pass, their bill to ban the base
Yay.
income pilots. They've done it twice so far and weren't able to do this. So now they're moving forward with a legal angle. And so the Texas Attorney General is officially suing Harris County to block their pilot, from starting, again, before it even begins. They're looking to cancel this, and this is actually after the results of two pilots in Texas have already shown successful results. So that's frustrating.
Yeah. This is
Maybe
the
I'll say I'm
Houston
going
one.
down to.
Sorry.
I'll be in Texas in 2 days, so maybe or 3 days. So maybe I'll start trying to wrestle up some shit.
The pilot that they're looking to stop from happening, it's a larger pilot, so it's 1,900 people would receive $500 a month for a year and a half, and again, it's all the communication is along like the same things, but they're pushing this as saying that this is unconstitutional. Um, they're saying that you can't provide uh, income, or money to any individual uh, in Texas, like it's against the Constitution. And and then the response to this is, well, you know, we're doing this uh, with stuff like subsidies and school vouchers. Um, that's one of the big ones that the counter argument is there, because one of the a push there in Texas is actually to um, enable rich families who otherwise have to pay out of pocket for a private school, because they don't want to send their kids to public school because those aren't good enough. That that this would allow those with plenty of income, those with high income, to pull money from the public school system and use that money for private school. So this would actually be, highly beneficial to rich families in Texas that would essentially be giving them money that they could spend on private school. And of course, no one's arguing that that's not constitutional in Texas. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see where that goes in Texas with that lawsuit. But
do we know any of the people that are running those? It'd be interesting to hear from people that are running programs that are kind of under threat, or that are organizing programs that seem like they're in danger of people shouting out against them. Be good to hear what they have to say about how it's all going down.
Yeah, that could be an interesting guest to like get someone from Uplift, or to get someone from this Harris County program to talk about that kind of thing. Sure.
All right. Yeah, I see him chattering on the GICP list a lot. That's why I first heard about it. Yeah, right. Might be worth reaching out to see if anybody wants to talk. But,
yeah, it's very interesting to see that. Do you get those, Scott? There's for those listening, there's a listserv, an email listserv for people who run pilots or involved with people running pilots, and it's kind of a tool for them to sort of ask each other questions about logistical things with the pilots, and like what's going on with all these laws that are passing, or we're setting up a pilot over here, and we're trying to figure out how to not affect anyone's benefits. And it's just seeing them respond in just like a sort of a real-time conversation to like all the hurdles that come with trying to implement a pilot, especially a pilot that's like sort of targeted anyway, and then now dealing with all this legal stuff is sort of a fascinating glimpse into that side of things.
Yeah, along those lines too. Again, this we've talked about this before. Just how it would be strategically wise for these pilot organizers, especially in states like Iowa and Texas, to create some pilots that actually really focus on conservatives and Republicans. Like really appeal to that side through. You could have like a rural pilot. You could have a pilot for farmers or veterans or coal miners, and if you had a pilot like that, it would make it so much harder for bills like these and strategies like these to cancel them and prevent them from happening.
Yeah, the kid-oriented ones seem to be a good angle that people have. It's like, so what? You want to come out and say you want to starve children? Yeah, nobody's going to come out and say that, and it does set a good precedence for saying, well, if you can help kids, then maybe you can help other people too.
Especially if it's everybody's kids. If it's like all inner city kids, you're still going to get the same sort of thing, right, where you're dehumanizing people on demographics. And, like what were you saying before, Scott? Like there's no one's arguing with the subsidies for farmers, or the subsidies for certain things. It's like, yeah, do a pilot for farmers, and who's going to come out and say we should stop helping farmers? I mean, ideally we do something universal, and that's what I want to push for. But as long as you're going to do something targeted to the very groups that are supporting or in the constituency of the people trying to fight it.
It's pretty sad that you have to. That's the way it needs. That's a good strategy, but it kind of is. Like, I think veterans also another good angle.
Yeah,
where you're sort of, reaching across the aisle for
first responders.
Yeah,
anything like that.
Yeah,
Even
that
with
was one of them.
active
Go
duty
ahead.
military would be interesting too, because I've seen before how a lot of a significant percentage of active duty families uh, are experience poverty, live right at the poverty line, even though even though they're employed in the military. You've got like it could be like unnecessarily or absurdly high cost of living in their particular area, combined with a low income for being lower rank, and it would be interesting to see some kind of pilot even that would focus on them, because then you've got not only you're focused on kids and through that, but also active duty military, not even veterans, um, and that could just be something as well, just on its own.
And these aren't even just like, conservative bulwarks. They're just like, they're just, kind of third rails. You support these things, and that's whenever something bipartisan goes through, or often when something like this is being addressed, is when we can finally get bipartisan support on something. You see
Yeah.
Jon Stewart go and embarrass all the Congress people about not helping first responders at 9/11. It's like, uh, that's going to go through, right? But if you start talking about like immigrant caregivers that were tangentially affected, it's like you can have a lot more trouble. Um, so if you're stuck playing the political game, play it smart.
Yeah, I would really love to see some more of this, and fortunately, again, this is another piece of news, but this is happening in the UK. At least the potential is there. So there's a new lobby group in the UK called Farmers for Basic Income that are pushing for a basic income program in the UK. They're actually pushing for like a UK wide program, but the the argument for this too is even like it's like a post Brexit argument. So in when they were still part of the EU, then there were like EU subsidies that these farmers had access to, and now they don't. So they lost those subsidies, and then of course the pandemic meant just higher inflation in general, so costs have gone up. So these farmers are just having a lot harder time in this both post-pandemic, post-Brexit world. So they're pushing for basically for farmers, and it's just interesting too to see the reaction to this. And this is even within the basic income movement, like seeing people respond to it, and I see this and go, great, like what a great step forward. It's something that conservatives can get behind too, and this could be a step forward. You could show just how impactful a fully universal basic income would be for farmers by just even starting with them. But then you just see a lot of people responding, saying, this I don't like this at all. This pisses me off. This should be for everyone. This should be fully universal. It shouldn't be just for farmers. And also, there's just anger too, because it was a lot of the farmers who actually voted for Brexit. So there's farmers now who are pushing for basic income post Brexit because of how they're hurting for Brexit. And then so you've got people basically saying, well, you deserve what you've done. You deserve to suffer because of what you did. And the last thing you deserve is a basic income just for you. And that you should, it should only be for everybody and not for you because screw you.
At least
Yeah.
not only for you, I guess. That is a bit of a bitter pill in any case. Is having it targeted in general. It's sort of sucks for everyone who doesn't get to be part of it.
Yeah, it's just a matter of do we see this as a kind of a half loaf of bread situation where we get part of the way there and then we're able to use that to uh, better get the other half, or is this a, oh, we do that but then that's all we ever get because there's no support for anything else. And I always just look at these as steps forward. I think it's I think that I think a good story from a farmer receiving a basic income is gold for the basic income movement. Just storytelling is just such a key part.
You got any of those, Conrad?
Stories. Who has the time for stories? Yeah. Actually, we're excited. I guess this is a bit of news. I can just share with people is just to kind of keep up on what we're doing, and we mostly talk about Comingle, but with Bootstraps and Comingle, we have ramped up a lot of what development post-production, and for Bootstraps, we're bringing back the editing team together after a couple of difficult pandemic years where we couldn't find any funding for anything, and we're going to be cutting these stories together. And also part of the travel that we're doing is to go around and build some friends of the project, and we're going to do that through various screenings and things. And it'll be the first time that we will have screened some of the more in-depth scenes from what happened when people actually got their basic income. Prior, and it's all been generally private, but prior we'd only really shared sort of like a setup, like here's like what we did, here's who we introducing, here's all the subjects, but not ever really sharing any of the footage from what happened when people are getting their basic income. And I had one test screening the other day where we were showing some of the scenes from when people were getting their basic income with just a live audience of a few people, and it reminded me just how stunning the shift is from this intellectual space of like talking about the issues people bring up when you're having a conversation, and you can explain everything perfectly, but only a very small percentage of it lands, to the instant you start showing clips of like, here's a family in Montana, here's a chicken farmer in North Carolina, here's whatever. And
I lost Conrad. Can other people hear him?
No, he cut out for me too.
No.
Just disappeared.
Just right
damn
in the
it!
middle. Now
Can
you're
you hear
back.
me now?
Yeah.
Yeah, we can hear you.
I don't know what happened, but where did I cut out? A long time ago?
About 15 seconds.
Well, essentially showing people the actual clips, everyone immediately gets it. It takes it out of this intellectual space and into a space of just understanding, both empathically and just in real terms, like understanding what it's like to live in someone else's shoes, understanding what it's like to have a basic floor of support. So I'm really excited to be sharing, to be going out and starting to do these screenings and sharing this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, just from the bits that I've seen, it seems like you've pretty much every topic that comes up when we're talking or in any conversation about UBI, there's some piece of footage that you've got that basically just backs it right up, which is it's interesting that way. It makes me think. I keep going.
Yeah. I know I talk a lot on this about like footage and stuff, but it's actually, I'm exercising as much restraint as I can not to like have a little anecdote about every damn thing we're talking about. I don't want people to get sick of me, but they're all there
too. That like one of my favorite things about each time I've been in the room for some kind of screening of footage from Bootstraps is that there's at least one person in the room, and usually more than one person, but there's at least one person in the room that no longer has dry eyes. Like it constantly brings people to tears, and it's not tears of sadness. This is tears of like happiness and joy, just to see just how impactful this is.
Yeah, it's super powerful, and we've been waiting so many years to do this. So like it's been really hard on just us knowing what we have in terms of this footage and this opportunity, and feeling the responsibility to bring it to fruition. But yeah, one of my favorite stories is at some conference early footage even. We started by having a conversation, which I think I'll start moving away from and just show the footage. But you have in any room, you have your devil's advocates, and it gets really wonky and everything. Remember this one kid, devil's advocating with me for a while, and I'm the UBI guy, so I was answering everything in depth, and everyone else in the room was like patiently waiting to hear all these answers about funding sources and everything. And then we said, okay, we're running out of time. Let's show the footage. And we showed 10 minutes of footage after an hour and a half of discussing. And the not only was everyone moved by it, but the devil's advocate guy just came up to me and said 3 words. He said, "I get it." That was it. So, yeah.
Yeah, I really do think that's like that's going to be the key takeaway, that even if they don't say those words out loud, that's what's going on, in the heads of so many viewers. I think and hope that I get it. Like, I really, it'll make sense. Things will click.
Yeah, it's a whole other interesting topic that is just like, what does it take to actually like convince somebody of an argument? Like, and basic income is one that seems like it should almost be like self-evident that it's a good idea, right? Like, if you want to help people be less poor, give them money and then they will have more money, right? Like, there's not a lot to actually grasping that. So it's more like this kind of psychological shift that has to happen. And like, it doesn't seem to be happening through politics very much. It doesn't seem to be happening that much through, just data or studies, or, I mean, a little bit. We're making these little baby steps, I guess, but like, that mental shift, like Conrad was talking about, of somebody just saying, "Oh yeah, I get it." It's like, even just like reading testimonials from people that you see a lot of. That's what a lot of the pilots end up producing is, you're getting these sort of firsthand accounts, this like anecdotal evidence, or what do you call it, qualitative evidence. And like, it's very convincing. It's really great. But even then, in that context, people just, it's easy to ignore, I guess. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's like the degree that people are impacted by this too. Like, so people can read, and this is, I see this all the time whenever I post the results of another pilot, and the pilot has another success, and all these great things happen. People will just say like, "Oh yeah, sure, but it'll just cause inflation." And it's great to give individuals money. We know that it'll help them, but we don't know what the overall impact on the economy will be when everyone gets this. And it's a legitimate response, but also it's part of that response is because they're not really like resonating with the results. It just seems kind of obvious or kind of data centric.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if you really feel it, if there's like these experiential stories that bootstraps will tell, when it really resonates with you, then suddenly the macro stuff is less important.
Yeah, you're going to
Because
feel like a real jackass talking about inflation when you've just heard some of these stories. You're like, oh,
right.
It's just it's experiential is the key. It's like it's a difference between sort of understanding a concept and feeling it. And you don't feel a concept when someone tells you like this many more people went to work or whatever, unless you really take time with it and say like, okay, imagine this person is in my life, and then what does it mean, and like look at the look on their face or whatever. But if you get invested in a person's life, you can feel what they're going through vicariously if you're experiencing it with them. And if you're obviously invested in your own life, so that's the Comingle side is even more experiential, is to give people a basic income and let them understand. Like a lot of it's easy, you start to take it for granted to a certain degree when you're in a position like me or Scott. Like I witnessed and lived with people getting a basic income for years, and Scott essentially has a basic income that he's lived with for years. And so it becomes way more just frustratingly obvious, like what the benefits are and why we should be doing it when you experience it. And so that's kind of why we took that shift. I mean, not really a shift, but we leaned into it further and further as time went on, as we just have to get people to be able to feel this, experience it.
Yeah. We are after 1 o'clock. We're in our second hour here. Just a reminder for people to please retweet the space, quote tweet it, encourage others to join us in here and listen. And since we're also in the second hour, if you'd like to be a speaker, come up and ask a question or respond to what we've been talking about so far, please do.
Yeah,
And
let's I mean, if we don't have much else, we just open it up for people to rant. Like, let's do 2-minute rants. If you got 2 minutes you want to fill with a rant about any of this, you got it. The floor is yours. But you'll get cut off after 2 minutes.
And
right,
maybe even
please.
what I like even better than rants is like a thought experiment that always is useful, which is what would you do with a basic income? Say we had $1,000 a month coming in that you could lean on. How would it affect your life this week, this month, in the next 10 years, with your kids? Like, what would it actually mean? Making it personal is a way to start to feel it.
There's also something that I want to make sure that we cover here and again help see the conversation that people can ask about or reply to. But this is something I shared this article this week, and it's actually an older article. It's from 2014, so it's 10 years old, and this is from a natural experiment that we've talked about before. I've certainly talked about it. I share it, like a lot of people know about it. But this was it was from like an interview that one of the lead researcher did, and I just wanted to even just read this whole thing. It's pretty short, but it's one of those things where it's just so powerful to me. I just feel that just hearing this should be enough. Like it should not be a challenge as much as it is to get people to see how good of an idea this is if they just knew this one thing. So I just want to make sure too that everyone that we can get to hear this one thing that they hear. Okay, so I guess it's 20 years ago, so 30 years ago now, the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians opened a new casino in Western North Carolina and made an interesting decision. The tribe decided to share profits directly with its members in cash payments of around $4,000 per person per year. And just to add to this is not part of the article, but just to add to this, that this actually started pretty small, like it was a few $100s per person, and then it quickly grew to around $4,000 per person per year, and then it continued growing, and like now it's over $12,000 per person per year. So just know that. Anyways, back to the article or the interview. My research team, this is Jane Costello, by the way. My research team was already studying child mental health in the area. We wondered, how would the extra money influence the future of the children who benefited from this monetary gain? Over the ensuing decades, we tracked the answer. We compared children's outcomes before and after the income supplements began. We also compared the Native American children with other children in the area who did not receive the extra income. The study looked at emotional and behavioral problems, physical health and obesity, school performance, crime, and education. Among children whose families were already prosperous or who were desperately poor, we found little change. One group is different, though. For families that hovered near poverty, the cash supplement lifted them above the federal poverty line. And in those families, we saw striking changes. 4 years before the supplements, these children had high levels of anxiety, depression, and conduct problems. 4 years after payments began, these rates were dramatically lower. Now these children are under their 30s. Again, just add this, now they're in their early 40s. And the results are compelling. As adults, those who receive the cash supplement use less alcohol and fewer drugs. They commit fewer minor crimes and are more likely to graduate from high school. Teen pregnancies are less common in this group, and at age 26, the average IQ of this group is a bit higher. Economists have since tracked the costs of the $4,000 annual supplement versus the savings and expenditures on crime and medical care. They find that by age 26, benefits exceed costs by a factor of 3 to 1. The numbers carry a clear message. We can choose to pay less now or pay more later. Our tax dollars can support poor families while their children are growing and developing. Or we can pay for their lack of education, obesity, alcohol abuse, and crime down the road in our healthcare and criminal justice systems. The statistics speak for themselves. Again, this is it's a very just short little interview, but it covers a lot, and I think people really need to know about this natural experiment that's been going on for decades, where you can compare the people, those who started receiving the basic income versus those who didn't. It was a kind of just a magical kind of coincidence that the study was already ongoing. Like the study was studying a group of kids growing up in poverty in North Carolina. The study started in 1992, and then this payment started happening to some of those kids in 1995. Like it's just a completely coincidental thing that happened that created this wonderful natural basic income experiment that's going on for decades. And you can just see a huge, clear difference between the kids who grew up with this as adults now versus the kids who did not grow up with it as adults.
Yeah, that's interesting that like the best experiment really is one that isn't even set up as an experiment. Like you've removed that kind of like confirmation bias or that people get accused of a lot. That it's like, no, we were just studying these people already. This is just what happened. Yeah. Do you have a link for that somewhere?
Yeah, I'll post that next. Conrad, did you want to add to this while I add a link?
Not really. I've always thought that was one of the most compelling ones. That story, that it came accidentally, but it sort of speaks for itself. It's I guess what it was making me think of, though. You're talking about 3 to 1. They found out after 3 decades was the return on the investment, essentially. But putting that into the context of what we were talking about earlier, which is there can be a 200 to 1 return on investment instantly, and we'll still have our political leaders turn it down. That's it's a little more depressing about whether or not, like, at least our political leaders will see that and care about it, especially when it's like something projected decades into the future rather than immediate. Which is just another reason we need to implement in a way that people can see and feel the difference. Like I would love to have, if we had 1 million people on Comingle someday, to just be able to show that population kicking ass, doing way better, show the average income of the group rising over time as people hold out and get better jobs and as people, support each other. I, I'd rather, I don't know what is going to be a tipping point situation where people finally get it, but even data like that's so compelling, for some reason people don't seem to look at it.
It's an interesting just way of thinking about how the money is getting back into the nations, right? Like it's coming through the casinos. So they've created a funding source privately and decided that private money should be going to everybody that is somehow affiliated. Like it's going to the entire community where this business is happening, which makes total sense for like why it's there to begin with. But like the same logic could be used for any company, any corporation that's in. I mean, normally you're doing that through tax dollars that are going back to the community, but if instead it just goes right back to people that are part of the community, then how is that any different, really? Yeah.
Yeah, I really want people to see basic income as an investment where we're spending more money, but also we're saving so much more money. And it's just there's not enough understanding of that. It's all just um, oh, this is more money spent, so therefore that's a lot more taxes, and so therefore, um, or regardless of that, there's a lot more inflation. Like, it's just seeing it as this cost, like just giving people money. But it really does make a huge difference that we would be spending a lot less elsewhere. It that that isn't only like smart investing, those have inflationary and tax consequences. Like if providing a basic income means that there is a significant drop in crime rates, which means a lot fewer people go into prison, uh, that a lot fewer people exit prison and then go right back to it. If there's a lot fewer people who are homeless that are uh, in need of shelter and all those really inefficient shelter costs, and you have all these people, going into hospitals and who have no insurance, who get this like, you know, disaster assistance right when it's at an emergency. Something like this. If we're spending millions of dollars for people's emergency health care that could have been provided, which a much smaller amount, uh, you know, decades ago, then we're spending less money there. Like if as a result of basic income, that there's less money spent on Medicare and Medicaid, that there's less money spent on private health insurance premiums, that there's less money uh, spent on the criminal justice systems. Therefore, there's less taxes required um, for that. Then these things can balance out to a degree that people just aren't recognizing. If you're, especially if you're actually seeing these huge savings, like if if it's possible that there's less spending going on these other things, then that could be technically deflationary, despite the new expenses, the expenditures on basic income. It's part of the cost argument to understand that this is as an investment. So another thing I wanted to cover next is this is actually just out today, and this is a new report by the Hamilton Project that I will again post in the comments. And this is a report that's focused on how the safety net is helping a specific group known as ABODs, otherwise known or stands for able-bodied adults without dependence. And like of this is the kind of understanding that people need to know that the safety net is failing in a huge way a lot of people. And one of those groups is actually this particular group. This is they're seen to be as the least deserving. They don't have any kids, they don't have any disabilities, and so in general, like there's just a lot more of a belief that, hey, if you're experiencing poverty, it's your own fault, and we're not going to help you at all.
What is this
So
acronym?
ABODs, ABAWD, able-bodied adults without dependence.
WD. Yeah. Yeah. There's
So there's some really
there's something insulting in there somewhere. I don't know if it doesn't feel good.
there's some really interesting stats in this report that I can go over. Um, so this is just to kind of get an overall understanding. Uh, in 2017, social insurance programs reduced poverty for children by 44%, reduced poverty among elderly adults by 69%, and it reduced poverty among adults with disabilities by 60%. And then looking at ABODs, it reduced their poverty by 8%. So it's just virtually ignoring this entire group. And this group is 1/3 of the country. So it's a very large group that we're entirely ignoring and saying poverty is your own fault, you get nothing. 14.4% of adults between the ages of 18 and 64 who do not reside with children and do not receive Social Security or supplemental security income were in poverty in 2017. So 14.4% of this group were in poverty in 2017. And the programs for them to reduce their poverty by 1.1 percentage points. Just, again, completely ignoring them. They're just falling right through the safety net. When we talk about how there's, it's 13 million Americans living in poverty who are not receiving any federal assistance at all, a large portion of that number are these ABOTs. From 1993 to 2017, the total reduction in poverty for all groups increased from the reduction in poverty increased from 6.9 to 11.9 percentage points, and for ABODs, the safety net went from reducing poverty by 0.8 percentage points to 1.1 percentage points in 2017. So again, not only is this group not only are they barely being helped, but even over time, as other groups are being helped increasingly more, there's barely any budge whatever over the past 25 years in this group as far as reducing their poverty. One of the factoids about our various safety net programs that I think is important. I will mention this a lot when I'm talking about SNAP, but if you're an able-bodied adult without a dependent, then you can only receive SNAP for 3 months out of every 3 years. So even if you get some help, like this program that actually helps this particular group, it helps them very temporarily. And then if they need help later on, if they, let's say they get a job after, they're on SNAP for 3 months, they get a job, and then they're doing okay for like a year, and then boom, something happens and they need help again, they are SOL. They have to wait, for 3 years to pass before they can get any kind of help again. Nearly half of low-income ABODs are women. So again, there's an assumption that a lot of these are like young dudes on the couch playing video games or whatever, and again, that they're not deserving of any assistance. But that is an inaccurate picture too of just this group. And it also assumes, like even within the acronym, this is able-bodied adults, and many of them actually have disabilities. Let's see, nearly 32% of ABOTs, about a third, living under 200% of the poverty line, have a disability.
So is this just means they haven't been approved by the disability department or whatever as having a disability, or it's a certain kind of disability where they say you're still able-bodied even though we don't recognize this as not able-bodied?
I think it's probably more along the second lines where it's just not recognized. Because again, that's just in general. There's 1 out of every 5 person with a disability in the U.S. receives any kind of disability assistance. So
It's sort of
there's just a lot of people that it could be temporary. It could be considered like not disabled enough. And so here's some more stats along those lines too that can inform this. 24% report that their disability affects their ability to work. A striking 46% of low-income ABODs who never entered the labor force in 2021 self-reported as a disability, and 83% of that group claimed their disability affected their attempts to work. And among ABODs who were employed all 12 months of 2021, 27% reported disability, and 39% of that group report that their disability impacts their work. So, these are people with disabilities who are working even, and, they still fall through. Again, like we're talking about able-bodied adults without disabilities, who are considered undeserving, and yet even in that group, you've got lots of people with disabilities who are working.
And it's such a catch-22 in any case, because if you go through the process of getting qualified for a disability, the way like that process plus whatever the benefits are designed in such a way as to screw you. Like you're never allowed to work again. You never, your whole quality of life is gone. And people don't want that either. So we basically don't really have a viable option for most people to have appropriate and deserved support, even along like the idea of what's appropriate and deserving that most people hold. It's like they're if someone's doing their damnedest to live up to like a sort of Puritan whatever ideal of hard work and non-complaining contribution to society, we still screw them over.
Yeah.
I mean, it really kind of gets at the core of a lot of the like argument against basic income. Really, is like if you really do just picture the lazy bum, like the lazy fucker who does not want to get a job, could get a job, living at their parents' home, like your worst possible picture of this caricature of the, the ne'er-do-well, right? You still got to say, like, do you want that person to die? Like, like even though, like, yeah, maybe they are like slacking off to, maybe they are turning down great opportunities for some weird reason, but like, it doesn't mean they should starve to death, right? Like, at least, like, maybe if there's a little something there as a means of support, that, it doesn't have to necessarily be their parents, right? It doesn't have, maybe there's some little independence that can be given by like having that little bit of money. Like sometimes you live with your parents because they're the ones that actually can support you, right? Like you're in your parents' basement for a reason, right? Maybe you can move out if you had the money to afford a cheap apartment, and then maybe you can become your own person, right? Like if you really look at that part of the argument, like it still holds up, right?
Well, and I've asked that before too, and not even ignoring the fact that a lot of the reasons people have destructive or check out apathetic behavior or whatever is because they've sort of had their ability to find purpose in their life squashed. Like a lot of people given some freedom stop being, ne'er-do-wells or whatever. But even despite that, I've tried to very, very much simplify the answer or the question into moralistic terms of should abject laziness warrant death penalty? And people don't actually answer it. They just kind of, but what about inflation or what about this? It's right. Like, that's not the question. That's not the question.
It's good. You just
should
have like
people die.
There's something about like there's something built into us where we, shun the lazy person. We shun the person that isn't going to be carrying their weight. Like I think it's a pretty, base level reaction of like, you just want to. The person in your community that's holding you back could in a very primitive sense cause the rest of you to die, right? But we're well beyond that. We're okay now. We don't have to worry that one lazy person is going to cause the downfall of our entire, tribe, right? I don't know.
One answer, like someone could be honest in their answer and say like, I don't believe that they should die, and then they'll point out that we have hospitals, and they'll. I'm not saying that someone who's in serious danger should just die, and uh, that's also kind of it's agreeing to the to it to being okay with treating this through the hospitals and prisons. Like I don't think someone should die. I think that we should spend millions of dollars saving them in the hospital, and then because they don't have health insurance, then everyone else's premiums go up, including mine. Like I'm okay with spending more money on my health insurance premium in order for someone else to not die.
Right.
But I'm not okay with paying more taxes in order for them to not end up in the hospital and therefore save money. That doesn't make any sense. And same thing with the
Right.
with
Well,
the prisons, where you're like,
if
someone can
yeah,
go in prison, and we'll make sure that they get fed, 3 meals a day, but only if they're
and
in prison.
right. It just never gets to that point because that is not how the people actually feel who would be against it, is that they would rather waste a lot of money keeping someone alive and fed. Um, it's really hard to like present that question in a way where someone will actually answer it, because if they actually answer it, then pointing out that hospitals and jail costs a lot more than just giving someone a basic income, um, it sort of gets them stuck. But I
Because
think
I think
they
what
they,
they're
they
really
sense it
saying is
coming,
that
so they don't go down that route. They
they're
said they
saying it
don't
shouldn't
answer
be
it.
my problem. They're saying this is not something I should care or worry about, right? What
Hmm.
becomes of this person that is struggling is not something that I should have to struggle to even think about. I think that's
And
the
then it's
sort of
somehow
core
good for them.
answer.
That
Right? Yeah.
they need the struggle in order
Hmm.
to learn, and they're never going to learn if they don't have the struggle. Kind of reminds me too of that comic. I don't know if I'm getting this accurate, but the general gist I have, which is the one where there's someone like drowning out at sea, and then there's someone on a boat right next to them, and they're holding a life preserver, and the thought bubble among the person, it says something like, "Are you going to use this for drugs?" No,
Yeah.
like
Or they're
it's
standing there with there's the high five one too, standing there with a life vest, and they're like standing there spouting advice like swim harder, like
yeah, like there's this disgusting kind of self responsibility stuff where if you don't help them, yes, the reality is that they'll drown. And so, are you a good person for sitting there with something that could help them and asking them questions about
Right.
if they deserve to be there or not, or if
Hmm.
they should try harder?
Yeah. I mean, that's it's sort of like a miswiring that's happened in our brains. I think where I think it is a pretty like built-in mechanism that's at work all the time of like knowing how to allocate your resources properly. Like this is all happening uh, in primitive parts of your brain, right? And there's all kinds of interesting studies about like how people think about these topics, and but mm, and then, so I think that's kind of one of the reasons why I'm focusing on like how can we just automate some of these processes to take them out of these kind of screwed up uh, mechanisms that our brains are doing that are based on very on worlds that we don't really inhabit anymore, right? Like it's we're not we're not in a jungle. Um, there's no immediate threat of starvation happening. Like we can sort of move on from those mechanisms. Maybe our little computers can help us. I don't know.
We have our first guest listener. Basic income, we owe it to us. Thanks for joining us today. But do you have a question for us? Want to add to what we've been talking about?
Carry groceries before I get to work, so I've been listening to the conversation. Very interesting. Thank you for having me here.
Thanks.
Sorry about my breath. So we're building a new kind of take on the base and actually organizing like a campaign here locally in Chicago. You say it's like an educational campaign and a community building campaign, just awareness how to interpret this concept. I'm specifically interested in advocating one particular take on base income. And all of you, well, represent that. It seems like a lot of the focus is on the humanitarian aspect of the basic income, which is great. I agree, it's all there. But I think the most compelling way to look at it from the business perspective. And so I think we should look at nation states, especially nations, as owners of land, as corporations. Fundamentally, what they really are is like they're the reason that I'm in the and I'm an immigrant in the United States, nationalized citizen, much more interested in the U.S. than Poland for originating. But okay, I didn't do it. My mother really moved us, but it was for economic interests. She traded the nation of Poland.
You might want to jiggle your mic a little bit. You're kind of breaking up.
Yeah, it's really hard to understand you.
We're hearing the gist of it, but a few things are getting lost.
Okay. So I think we should look at the United States as a corporation fundamentally. The citizens are the voting shareholders. The legal residents are the non-voting shareholders. And a corporation, what's the fundamental purpose is profits for the government. So I think as essentially it is. And if the dividends are being paid out, then we're being robbed. That's, and I think to me, the most compelling is getting people to feel cheated by not implementing policy. I want to add on to that because this is an important part of business economics of this. Because the
So
question is,
it's really hard to understand you. It's just crackling up a lot. So can you please just try to really shorten it down, and then we can address like something short instead of something longer, because then it just keeps like breaking up.
I'm sorry about my audio quality. I thought it would be great, but yeah. So the question is,
And we lost him.
Oops. I think
we
it
can
sounded
address
a little
the
bit
gist.
like what was he's sort of like saying if we think of our nations or our state governments or whatever more as in terms of big corporations than in terms of anything else. Is that sort of the angle that he was coming at?
Yeah, that's what I got. And then there's like shareholders that would get dividends of that corporation, where citizens are voting shareholders and non-citizens are non-voting shareholders, and treat it like a dividend. And yeah, there's a lot of people who like that argument, and I'm one of them. I don't know exactly about saying drawing a direct line between a nation and a business, especially at least here, where businesses are understood to be for profit, and that's the North Star is profit. Everything's about profit. We're actually trying to find a way to make Comingle very different than that, but the North Star of a government should be the welfare of its people, the well-being of its people, the safety of its people, not some measure of profit.
And in the same way, a corporation's sort of measure of its success is how well it benefits its shareholders. But it never quite seems to work out. In either case, it seems to be the bigger shareholders have the most say, and also the bigger shareholders in government seem to have the most say. So there's something broken in both cases, I think.
there's also some conflation going on between shareholders and stakeholders, where if everyone in the country is a shareholder, then you're sort of addressing all the stakeholders, at least within the country. Whereas when the corporation, the shareholders aren't the stakeholders. There's so many people that get affected by the way a corporation runs its dealings that don't have any share in the profits of the company. So the metaphor doesn't always hold up perfectly, but treating everyone like they have an ownership in, I like the commons argument. Everyone has a bit of ownership in it's the things none of us created. The land and the general progress that has been made by humanity and the generations before us. Like, no one can claim to own that, so we should all have a share of it as like a universal asset. And if there's some sort of mechanism of thinking it like as a business, then that helps people, then fine. It's just, yeah.
Yeah, Andrew Yang actually talked about this a lot for his freedom dividend. It was part of the reason why he called it the freedom dividend too, was this dividend kind of understanding. And in speech after speech, he would talk about how hey, corporations distribute dividends. It's like a sign that you've reached it, that you're a success as a corporation, that you can actually convert over from being like a growth corporation to a dividend corporation. And it should be seen as every citizen should say, hey, the United States is doing great. Our stock market is doing great. Our GDP is doing great. And as it does greater, then we should do greater. That's also one of the reasons why I like the design of being some percentage of GDP per capita, so that it actually kind of follows that. Like as the national economy grows, then the dividend automatically grows. And then it's not about setting it for inflation, or setting it as a set number and then increasing it at some point. Like, instead, it's just, hey, as productivity increases, as overall productivity increases, because we get some set percentage, then it just grows. I just think that makes a lot more sense, and it has good incentives. If the incentive is that the amount grows, if productivity grows, then suddenly, like, automation is less of a scary thing. Like, yeah, please add robots and AI to the economy that will estimate, say, add like 1 to 1.5% of GDP growth per year just through automation. Great, because now that actually increases the amount of my dividend by that same amount. It just makes a lot more sense.
Mm-hmm.
Devin, thank you for joining us today. Do you have a question, or would you like to add something to what we've been talking about?
Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Yeah, I can't stay long. I just wanted to make a point about the approach to promoting UBI as a concept to more influential people, because I think we all agree as consumers that things are getting more difficult as income options are drying up, especially this decade with AI rolling in. But business owners pretty much just see consumers, like, from their end user experience. They expect consumers to have their own purchasing power. They're not going to see everything systematically. But I think, like, for instance, millennials and Gen Z are blamed for not spending enough when they don't really have the same income options as previous generations, for instance. I think it's better to, instead of using the humane argument that people should have X, Y, and Z rights to services and income, and they're just making a moral argument about it. I think it's better to look at it from the business owner's perspective, and they're just as frustrated with consumers not having purchasing power because they're not seeing as many people coming into their businesses. So I think it's better to promote UBI from the perspective of businesses, saying, consumers will have more reliable spending power. You'll have more people coming into your business because, regardless of the reason why they don't have money in the first place, using UBI, they would. So there'd be less fluctuation in what you can expect from your customers.
Yeah, tying this back even to what started our conversation today with the ban in Iowa. Again, this means money coming from outside the state to inside the state. And where does that money go? Well, it's spent in Iowa. Where is it spent in Iowa? Well, maybe some people are buying from Amazon, although even if you spend your money on Amazon, there's definitely Amazon jobs that's supporting in Iowa. But also people get that money and they spend it in their local grocery store for food, and that becomes the paychecks for people in those grocery stores. It just anytime anyone's spending this in Iowa, that's helping the local economy of Iowa. So yeah, I don't understand why politicians who talk all the time about how important small business owners are to the engine of the U.S. economy, they would actually be why they're against, like you said, consumers having more money to spend locally. It's beyond me, but it would certainly be helpful if there was more discussion along the lines, especially discussion from conservatives to other conservatives about that being so important.
I know politicians have their reasons for blocking UBI or being courageous enough to support UBI, but I just mean public support, public sentiment about UBI, and especially from the business class. And that's big business or small business, because I speak to people all the time about UBI, and they don't see it from the perspective of making more money as a business owner. They just think that we're making some kind of a moral argument that people should have access to services, or even healthcare should be easier than UBI to get, and we can't even get that, and it's life or death.
I would caution. I agree in general that the moral argument is less powerful. But I've spoken to lots and lots of people about basic income over the years, and I find that the most powerful thing is to be able to meet people where they're at. And not everyone is at the place where they want to see things from the idea of a business. A lot of people want to see things from the perspective of individual freedom and autonomy. A lot of people do care about, the moral side of things, and are very driven by and motivated by sort of religious values. I think it's important that we don't try to find the silver bullet that is the only way. Like some people say, this is the way you have to argue for this principle, and that immediately takes an idea that is a very Big Ten idea that has a lot of ways in for a lot of people, and sort of closes the door on a lot of people. So while I agree that like the business aspect of it and the dividend aspect of it is powerful, I think we have to be receptive to our audiences and able to shift and let people have their ways in.
But yeah, I mean, as far as like a way to frame the argument, you don't hear it that often, really. Like, this is good for your local business, and which is automatically things that are good for local business start to become a little more like right leaning, right? Like, as soon as things become better for business, then they do start to have a bigger appeal to certain audiences. So yeah, it's not an angle that you see discussed that much, and I mean a little bit, but
there's weird overlap between how good it is for consumers, especially locally, with the inflation fears. Like I hear so often that really it's become the most popular argument against basic income is inflation by far. People, sure, there's still lots of people who say, oh, people stop working, but really disproportionately, there's been a lot of growth, and it has overtaken everything else as far as, oh, companies will just raise prices. So leaning into consumers having more money to spend at local businesses, it's just kind of funny how, like, technically one of those responses could be, yeah, but those businesses are just going to raise prices. In which case, that's good for the local businesses. You know, like if you've got a bunch of Main Street USA in Iowa, and there's a base income in Iowa, then that spending is great for those local businesses. And let's say that they do raise prices more than necessary, so that they see a lot more profits across Iowa. Again, because those are local businesses, then those profits are actually going right back into the community, and people have more money to spend through their wages. So yeah, it's just kind of interesting to me to think about that that kind of overlap and contradiction or something between wanting consumers to have more money to spend and this concern that basic income will just lead to inflation.
Mm-hmm. Although I do want to, I think I want to push back a little harder too. That while it's very compelling to me, these sorts of arguments, I want to go back to what we were talking about before, where the intellectual sorts of arguments, about economic theory, about business, about whatever, they don't get people in a place where they really take something in very strongly, and I find that a lot. Like I make this very argument all the time, and I mostly don't get a lot of quick reception to it. I think that this is why over time I've wanted to more and more get people emotionally invested, and that doesn't have to mean with moralistic arguments. It can mean with just a deeper human understanding of what it would feel like, look like in their lives, in their communities, in practice. I think that is the most powerful, and it's sort of validated by some of the research we did recently in terms of, or I was looking at research they've done about messaging and what's the most effective in getting people to support basic income. And some of it surprised me, but the one takeaway is way more than, say, the resilience argument was like it'll help you in a pinch and it'll help people be stronger, which gets you sort of thinking about others rather than thinking about yourself. The most powerful argument across demographics and political leanings was more of the freedom and autonomy arguments, the ability to make choices for yourself and decide what you're going to do with your life. And in whatever these studies were, they find that those are the most impactful arguments on pretty much any group. So I would be wary to be super confident that like any one magic bullet sort of theory argument that stays in the intellectual space is going to get us over the finish line. I think it's a tool for the arsenal, but it's not necessarily like the answer.
Yeah, and I think that's good in general too. To besides being like driven by the data, saying that this actually works really well, to talk about basic income being so supportive of economic freedom, and that that is a strong argument. And it certainly it reaches out more to conservatives. I would also add that it's even more important to make that argument to conservatives because there just seems to be a lot of misinformation, mostly among conservatives, where you'll see this response saying, "Oh, basic income is slavery," and it's interesting how those who are most interested in freedom can be against something that enhances freedom in this belief that it somehow enslaves them. It's very frustrating to see that, as if oh no, everyone in Alaska receiving the annual dividend is enslaved by the state government of Alaska, and oh no, every senior getting a Social Security payment every month is enslaved by the government. And clearly, seniors are being influenced and told what they need to do in order to receive their Social Security payment. They're totally under control of the government. That's nonsense. We know that the opposite is true. That seniors are actually more empowered, and they're the ones that get what they want from the government. They are catered to by the government. Politicians fear seniors and worry that they will lose their support as a voting bloc if they do something that pisses them off or if they don't give them what they want.
Yeah.
Yep. I think we are at 11, if I'm not mistaken here.
Yep, we have reached the end. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today to listen in to the discussion. We will not be here next Wednesday, and we may not be here the week after that, too. Or no, we have a guest actually for week after next. It's just Conrad might not be here, but we will get a lot of these episodes up. Josh just added, I believe, a new one to the.
It's on its way. Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, be looking for the previous episodes on the Comingle channel, and sharing those episodes with the people. And yeah, we will see you in a couple more weeks. Conrad or Josh, do you have anything else to add before we go?
Just thanks to the people who jumped up and asked questions. I always like to get other voices than just us shooting the shit up here. It feels good to have other people engaged. So thank you, Devin, and Basic
Thanks
Income.
for listening, everybody.
All right, thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Until next time, bye.